Hello and welcome once again to the TDD Basics course on Eduonix. My name is Ilya and this is section 3. In this section we are going to discuss unit tests and specifically we are going to test our modules. So first thing first, let's go ahead and create a new module. For example, let's call it just user. A user is going to have like a name and an email, nothing fancy. So note that when I run this model generator, I also get those things here. So the test is being generated for me automatically. Why? Because I have not skipped the default testing suite when generating this application, and therefore the module test called simply user test was generated for us. We will talk about fixtures in the upcoming episode, so ignore this for now. Alright, now let me open my project and let's see. Here is the modules directory and the user test. And as you see, the test helper is being required by default. And also there is the class called after the file. By the way, note that each file should end with the test word. And it inherits from active support test case. And here is some example on how your tests can look like. So this test here is just a macro, so instead you can say something like test the truth. It's pretty much the same, but usually developers stick with this test version. So inside we can see this assert method, and so there are lots of assertions that are available for us. You can open this guide, testing Rails applications, at guides.rubyonrails.org, and here you may find various assertions that are available for us. So you can say assert, assert not equal, and so and so and so. There are a lot of them. And also there are some Rails-specific assertions that are used to test routes, for example, to test some responses with redirect to, and so and so and so. So you can utilize any of them. And now let's write our own test. For example, let's test that a user is not valid without, for example, without an email. And to do that, I'm going to say user equals to user.new, assert not, and then, for example, user.valid. So we are checking that a user is not valid if we are not setting an email for him. We may also try to set some name like this, but do not set an email. And currently this test will of course fail because, we don't have any validation for our user. And yeah, by the way, you are going to get this message here saying that you must do migrations, of course, specifically for your testing environment, for your testing database, because testing database and development and production databases, they are all different. They are not the same. So I'm going to run migrations for both development and for the test. And now if I open this DB folder, I'm going to find two databases. And speaking about configuration, of course you can go to the database.yaml file, and here you are going to find the configuration for your testing environment, saying that here is the database's name. Alright, now let's do a Rails test once again, and we are going to see that we get this red message saying that there is a failure on line 6. On line 6, so right here. Apart from saying Rails test, you can provide the path to the file that you are interested in, like this. Because if you are saying simply Rails test, you are going to run the whole testing suite, and this way you can specify some individual file like that. Also note that the speed of our tests is pretty fast, so we've spent like less than a second to finalize testing of our application. Now we can make this test pass, so make our test green. Remember we talked about red, green and refactor cycle in the previous section. So I'm going to say validates email presence true, something like that. Yeah, something like that. Now let's run our test again, and indeed we get this green dot, meaning that we are running one test, one assertion, and there are no errors, which is pretty good. Of course, we can do the same for the name without a name, for example, something like that. Say that we are specifying some email. And once again, we are saying this assertion and specifying that the user is not valid. Alright, now we are going to get, of course, one green and one red message here, because we have one passing test and one failing test. So let's do pretty much the same. Let's say that a name should be present, like this. Now our test should pass. And so that's pretty much it. Instead of saying assert not, you can say refute. So that's just a simpler way to write this assertion. And of course we can provide yet another assertion and saying, yet another test and say is valid with like a name and an email. So we can provide both a name and an email and say that assert valid, like this. Let's check now that everything is alright. Alright, it's actually should be valid, sorry. So yeah, this E means that we don't have a failing test, but we have an error. So let's fix this error. And now everything is green, which is pretty cool. By the way, you are not obliged to use this test version, so this test macro. Instead, we can go to the official documentation of Minitest and take a look at this spec feature. It's, well, as it said, it's a very fast, simple and clean spec system. So spec is, well, a bit different way to write your tests. Let's try to utilize it. I'm going to copy this thing here, go to test helper and require it like this. And next we can rewrite our test by saying describe user do. And then we can say something like, well, let's copy those things here, and instead of saying test we are going to say it and here. So basically we can read it like we are describing a user and it is not valid without an email, without a name, and it is valid with a name and an email. So this is yet another form to write your tests, and this form is used in another library called RSpec that I mentioned in the previous section. So this is up to you on how you'd like to write your tests. Let's try running it now. And as you see, everything is all right, so no errors. By the way, it can be a bit tedious to instantiate user every time. So if you are sticking with a test macro, you can say setup like this. And the setup is a method that is going to be run before every test that you have. So for example, you can say something like I don't know, something like user. And then, for example, let's say that this is going to be an instance variable because it should be visible in other methods of this class. And here, instead of instantiating this user, I'm going to simply remove an email like this. I'm going to say that the email is new. The same should be done for the name here. And as for the last test, we're not going to do anything, but also we need to, of course, use instance variables everywhere. Let's try it now. And as you see, it works. The same can be done for the describe method, and well, when you are writing specs, not when you are using test version. Here you can use before. And you can say before each do something. This is once again very similar to what is happening in RSpec. In RSpec you can use before and after hooks. So here once again let's copy this line of code. Copy here, place it here, and remove this one. And once again we can utilize this instance variable now. Clear out this name, and let me remove this part here. Well, let me comment it out so you can have it. So you can access it on GitHub when browsing source code for this video. And let's test that it still works. Yeah, now we're having, yeah, sorry. I made a typo, so it should be like this, of course. Let's try it once again, and it works. So these are two ways of how you can write your test. Of course, pick the one that you prefer. It's up to you, of course. And before wrapping up this episode, let me show you a couple of other ways of how you can define this user, because, well, writing this before each block is quite tedious, and, well, actually this block is not really meant for this stuff. Instead, what you can do is you can say let and then user, and simply place this code here inside this block. Now we can remove before each, and this is going to create a user for us, but it is not going to be created as an instance variable anymore. So we can simply say user without an at symbol everywhere, and let's test it out. Let's run our test again, and as you see, it still works. Another even smaller solution would be to use a subject method. So you can say subject like this, and it is going to set a testing subject for us. So now, instead of saying user, you are going to say simply subject everywhere. Of course, you can have only one testing subject per describe block, but still it is a quite nice way, because this way you explicitly tell what is, well, like a main star of this test, a main subject, a main object that we are interested in, and as you see, it works as well. So let's wrap up this episode now. In the next episode, we are going to talk about our fixtures, about loading sample data for your tests. So stay tuned and see you really soon. Hello and welcome once again to the TDD Basics course on Eduonix. My name is Ilya, and this is section 3, unit tests models. In this lecture, we are going to talk about test database and fixtures. So fixtures is just a word to describe sample data that are used for your tests. So, well, obviously, web applications are all about data, well, usually. So we, of course, need some sample data to write our tests, well, to set some assertions, so on, so on, so on. And well, as you already know, by default we're using SQLite 3 adapter that, well, as I showed you in the previous video. So, and all the configuration can be found under the config database.yaml file, where you can set what database do you wish to use for different environments. And also, as you remember, we've used railsdb migrate command to apply migrations to our testing database. Also, there is yet another command that is used well, when your existing migrations were modified, and this command is railsdb prepare. It is going to rebuild your testing database. So now the question is, what are fixtures and how do we work with them? So you can read more about fixtures on this link at api-rubyonrails.org, and all in all, they are used to populate your test database with some sample data. Fixtures are basically database independent, so you can use them with Postgres, with SQLite 3, and so on, so on, so on. And the data is stored in a form of YAML, in a YAML format. And YAML means yet another markup language. So that's a very simple format of storing your data. And YAML uses a key value notation to define your data. It's a very, very simple format that is used quite extensively in Rails and Ruby. So if you have never heard about this format, well, we are going to utilize it quite extensively when working with fixtures. So spend some time and read about it on the net. And this format can contain embedded Ruby. So just like with views, you can utilize embedded Ruby to like organize maybe a cycle and create not one but maybe, I don't know, 10 users in a cycle or something like that. And well, fixtures, the main benefit of fixtures is that they are quite fast and they are very easy to use. And by default, Minitest utilizes fixtures, and so when we created our model, as you remember, a fixture file was created as well. So we are going to utilize fixtures throughout this course. Fixtures are separated into different files, so you have one file for one table. And note that all fixtures are loaded automatically when you start testing, running your tests. So when you say Rails test, fixtures are loaded, and note that the corresponding table is being erased. So any content that is found in this table is erased, and then new sample data are, well, being loaded. So note and, well, never ever try to store some permanent content into your testing database, because it is usually being erased to load new fixtures. And of course you can access your test sample data in the tests, and later we are going to see some examples of that as well. Obviously there is another way to work with sample data, as you probably know. Well, if you don't, that's no problems. There is a gem called FactoryGo that can be utilized to set up Ruby objects as test data. So that's a third-party solution that you can utilize to load sample data as well. And FactoryGo is database independent, just like fixtures. But with FactoryGo you can define quite complex object with ease, and you can specify various strategies for building data. So you can, for example, only build some sample data in memory without storing it in your database. You can build your object in memory and run all the callbacks, or you can store your sample data in the database. So FactoryGo is really convenient when you have complex data, because fixtures are quite rigid, but there is a trade-off. So FactoryGo is slower than fixtures, so well, it's for you to decide what you prefer to use. And of course, to make such decision, you should try both fixtures and FactoryGo. Well, throughout this course we are going to use only fixtures. In my other course about Rails 5 I am using FactoryGo, so you can refer to that course to learn more about using FactoryGo in practice. So alright, let's return to our project, and let me open fixtures directory. Here is a users.yaml file, and here you see that two records defined for us. Well, the first is named 1, the second is named 2. Of course, we can rename it to something like, I don't know, John maybe, and N. And here we can say that the name is John and N, and email is something like that. So we can utilize those fixtures, and the same way we can define as many fixtures as we like. So once again, that's how YAML format looks like. You have a key and you have a value, and you can have nested values as well. So under the key named John, we have two more keys named name and email, and that's how it looks like. To access some fixture, you can say something like this. Let's output our John to the screen. So this method, well, it is named after the file that contains your fixtures, and John, of course, corresponds to this key here. So this way you can access this sample data. Alright, let's try running our test. And as you see, here is our record. If you take a look at that should be test SQLite3, of course, the database. So I am opening the users table, and here is our fixture, our two fixtures. And note that if I run this once again, the database will be wiped out and new values will be loaded into it. So the values are not being duplicated, but new values are being loaded. So that's how you can work with the fixtures. So, well, for example, here you can utilize this fixture by saying John like this, and simply utilize this variable everywhere. Let's try it now, and it works. But, well, there is one problem, however. So this works perfectly when we're utilizing this active support test case. But as you remember, in the previous video, we've utilized another approach to write our tests. So we've used this describe, subject, and it methods. And note what happens when I try to utilize fixture now right here. So I'm going to say users John here, say Rails test, and as you see, it fails. So we are getting undefined method users, and that's indeed quite bad. You can find detailed explanation about what's happening on this Stack Overflow discussion, but, well, here is one of the possible solutions that you can utilize and fix that error. So firstly, we need to extend Minitest Spec DSL, inside the test helper. So let's do this. And next we need to provide the following code. And this should do the trick. So let's try it now. Say Rails test. And now it works. So that's one of the possible solutions. Another solution would be to simply utilize an already existent gem that was, by the way, created by the guy who wrote this answer. And this gem is called mini test Rails. It works with Rails 5 without any problems, and you can use it to overcome problems with your fixtures as well. So let's try using this gem instead. I'm going to open my test, sorry, that should be group, of course, test, say gem mini test Rails. I'm going to say bundle install. And next, let's simply follow the guide. Let's simply follow the guide. So we can utilize this Rails generate command. It is going to create a new version of the test helper.rb file. So let's do it now. Let's just see the difference between those two files by saying D here. And well, those are the differences. So it is going to provide the Rails environment. It is going to require Rails. And well, some additional comments. So I think that's okay. Let's say yes. I want to overwrite this file. Let's check it now. And well, there are some differences, of course, but all in all, it's quite the same. Let's also add comment for fancy colorful output, just to make things a bit more bright and interesting. And let's try clearing the screen and running the test again, just to make sure that everything is working just fine. Oh wow. Yeah, well, that's too bright, I think, well, because it's looking quite strange, but yeah. And well, let's comment it back, because well, it's very strange. Well, I mean, it's fun, but very strange, and I prefer using this green because, well, red, green, and refactor, and here we don't understand what is happening. So either it's green or red or what. So it's funny but not very productive. But all in all, as you see, it works now without any additional fixes from our side, and I think we are going to stick with this nice mini test Rails gem throughout the course as well. So that's pretty much it about fixtures. Now let's proceed to yet another section of this episode and talk a bit more about sample data, and specifically we are going to set up some association between our models. So see you there. Hello and welcome once again to the TDD Basics course on Eduonix. My name is Ilya, this is section 3, lecture 3, and we are going to talk more about fixtures in this video. Specifically, I'd like to show you how to set associations between your fixtures, and well, to do that, let's create a new module called subscription. So we are going to allow users to subscribe to our newsletter, for example. So I'm going to say that subscription belongs to a user. This subscription, I think, won't have any additional fields for now. So as for the subscription, we are going to simply contain the user's ID and the date when it was initially created. Later we can extend it and maybe add a field saying how often does the user want to receive a newsletter, but for now it's quite okay. So let's do just this, and next let's check that it belongs to a user. Let's also say that a user has many subscriptions, dependent destroy. something like that. And now let's also check the test that was generated for us, and to see this test utilizes active support test case, but I'd actually like to utilize specs, not these test cases. So to do that we can check the docs for Minitest Rails gem, and as you see we can utilize this config option, place it inside our application RB file, and let's say that we wish to utilize specs and fixtures when running our generators. And also, you know what, I think we need to move Minitest Rails under development and test group as well. Now let's do bundle update. Let's destroy this thing here and try to generate a subscription again, just to see what is going to happen, so what is going to change. So I'm going to say subscription user belongs to once again. So it's not, of course, replacing migrations and the model because it's identical, but it is going to create a test once again as well. And now, as you see, it's looking a bit different, right? Well, not a bit, it's looking quite different actually. So it's describing a model for us, and it utilizes this alert method that we were talking about in the previous video, and it utilizes it to actually create those specs. And also, by the way, it provides us with yet another way of setting our well, it's called expectation actually. So we can say that the value of this subscription must be valid. So this is yet another way of how you can set, of how you can write your tests. So you are not obliged to stick with assertions. You can use must be or must not be or something like that. So this is, once again, it's up to you. Alright, now let's check the fixtures file, and inside you see we have a subscription, two subscriptions named 1 and 2, and as for the user we also have 1 and 2. So now we need to set an association between a subscription and a user. So let's see here. We still have two users, John and N. And I'd like to set, for example, the first subscription for John and another one for N. And that's it. So this way we are basically explaining to our fixture that when creating a subscription, please set the user's ID to the John's ID, and the same for N. That's how you can set up your associations. So let's test it really quick. I'm going to open this user test.rb. And here I am going to, for example, display something like subject subscriptions, inspect, something like that. Let's clear the screen, say Rails test, and we are going to reference the user test. Oh yeah, sorry. Of course, we need to apply our migrations because we have created a new table. Now let's run it again. And as you see, here we go. So we have one subscription for this user that was created like a couple of seconds ago. That's how you can work with associations, and that's quite cool as well. Alright, let's, I think, remove this line and group those three specs into one describe block by saying describe validations. Something like that. Out of the box, Minitest does not support nested describe blocks, but thanks to the gem, Minitest Rails that we've added in the previous video, it should work without any problems. Also, let's, I think, say describe and then method subscriptions, subscriptions, and provide should return a proper collection, something like that. And now let's use another assertion called assert includes to check that some object is present in a collection. So I'm going to say subject dot subscriptions, and then we're going to use subscriptions 1. So take the first subscription from our sample data. And I think it should work properly. Let's run our user test. And everything is quite fine. So now it means that we are able to get a list of or a collection of subscriptions for our testing subject. And well, before wrapping up this episode, let me show you how to utilize embedded Ruby inside your fixtures. So for example, I'd like to create like 10 users. So I'm going to say 10 times do. And then I'm going to simply create the user here. So let's say something like user underscore then I, and then provide the name and an email. Of course, I don't want to create like 10 Johns with the same email, obviously. So instead of that, let me utilize a gem called Faker. So Faker is a quite nice solution that allows you to load, to generate fake names, addresses, and so on and so on. So, for example, you can search for email, and next simply copy this line of code and place it here, like that. And the same for the name. And you can generate lots of other sample data by utilizing this gem. So let me place it inside the testing group. Say Faker here, say bundle update, for example, and that's it. So as you see, there are lots of different modules that you can take advantage of. Alright, so it's installed. Let's say Rails test now. Yeah, the only problem is that we should utilize the proper names for our users, so we don't have any John or anything like that. So instead, let's say, for example, user 1. And you know what? Let's start from... never mind. So let's say user 1, user 2 here. And also fix our tests here. So instead of John, it should be user 1. And yeah, this test we have not changed it. Once again, let's try it now. So expected subscription to be valid. Yeah, of course it's not valid. So let's remove this test here. I leave it for you as an exercise to flesh out the subscription test. All in all, it's not complicated because subscription only belongs to a user, so try to make this subscription valid. Alright, that's how you can utilize embedded Ruby inside your fixture files. Of course, we can do more than that. For example, let's create yet another user. For example, set it to user, I don't know, user 2, doesn't really matter. And next, what I'd like to do is I'd like to test for another validation rule, something like it is not valid with a duplicating email. So I don't want two users to have the same email address. And to do that, what I can do is I can say that the subject's email is equal to this another user's email. Sorry, that should be email. And I don't want my test subject to be vetted. So he has an email, he has a name, but the email is duplicating. All right. Let's try it now. And of course we get a failure because we are setting the expectation to not be truthy. So we want a validator to return a false value, but we get true because we simply don't have this validation set up. Therefore, let's proceed here and say uniqueness true, like this. Also, you can, by the way, add an index in your database, in your users table, and enforce uniqueness on their databases level as well. Let's run the test again. And now, as you see, it works. So we have created yet another test to make sure that there cannot be two users with the same email address. That's pretty much it about fixtures. So now let's proceed to the next section of this course and continue discussing various types of tests that you can write for your Rails applications. So stay tuned and see you really soon.